All right. Well, thanks for joining, Laura. We did our little catching up, but
Yeah.
we'll go ahead and jump into our topic today, which is stage management and sustainability and accountability. But we can talk about various topics kind of around that as well. I guess to get started, I'm just kind of curious from your point of view, what your thoughts around green theater are, where you're kind of I mean, we've all had time to think in the pandemic, so if
Mhm.
that's given you more time to think, so just kind of seeing where you're at maybe as a starting point.
Yeah. I mean, my starting point is kind of I got interested in sustainability and stuff just in my personal life,
Mhm.
and had kind of segmented theater and my job as like, well, that's just not sustainable, and like there are aspects of my job that just like, I feel like I kill a lot of trees and like
Hmm.
office supplies are not generally made from sustainable materials and all of that. Um, and so I just kind of was like, well, I'll do what I can in my personal life and then just not worry about it at work.
Mhm.
And so I saw the topic and was just kind of interested to learn more about like what are realistic and practical ways to implement sustainability in theater and specifically in a stage management role.
Yeah. Well, some of these initial conversations that I wanted to do with the Green Theater Alliance, I more so wanted to hear if there was anything like specific anyone
Mhm.
wanted to see the Alliance do. And I think I'm definitely hearing like a trend of I need a tangible thing to do. Or
Yeah.
I need direction. Which, that's part of the reason I wanted to hold these community conversations because I didn't want to just start doing something because I had the idea. I wanted to make sure that I'm kind of aligned with what the community wants as well.
Mhm.
But I think stage managers hold like a really interesting place in all of this because, like, in the way that stage managers are connected with everyone, they can have that. I always call it kind of like a sphere of influence, kind of on a whole production team. So I'm just like, I think stage managers can really make this happen because, like, part of the Broadway Green Theater Alliance, they've got some stage managers working with them too. So
Mhm.
we all know stage managers make it happen. Have you heard of the Sustainable Production Toolkit?
I have not.
I will be sure to send you that. So that is something that a couple of folks kind of on the East Coast kind of developed in the downtime that was the pandemic that has some best practices kind of outlined in it. So I'll be sure to send that your way so you can kind of I think I've posted it on the Facebook page too, but I'll be sure to send it your way. Um, but yeah, I totally know what you mean in terms of like kind of having your personal life separate from like your theater life as well. Because it's just like, well, I just can't like I just like it's so hard to think of theater as sustainable in some ways. But I know for myself, like in the pandemic, like the more that I thought about it, the more that I was like, I just don't think like I just have to like find a way to like make it more sustainable to be like when you don't do it for a year and a half and then you have like time to think about it.
Mhm.
Well, there's that. But yeah, so because as a stage manager, do you feel like you can have that kind of like influence on the topic, like sustainability, to kind of like bring it up in certain settings?
Um, yeah, and I mean, I do think especially just like in terms of small changes that
Hmm.
kind of like people into it.
Hmm.
So like things as simple as like I don't automatically print a copy of the script for everybody.
Hmm.
I ask like if you need a copy of the script, let me know and I'm happy to print one for you. But just like avoiding having all those extra copies that nobody ends up needing that just go in the recycling or the trash. And like just like that throughout paperwork, like I feel like I know that I at least have a tendency to overprint things because I would rather have it when somebody asks like, oh, can I get a new copy of like the calendar or whatever, I lost mine, than have to like go take extra time to like print another copy out. I'd rather like have a whole stack and not need all of them, but be able to just like really easily hand those out as needed.
Yeah.
And like, I think that like moving away from that is a shift,
Mhm.
but definitely be one of those ripple effects that creates larger change and like over time, especially when you look at, you know, how many different documents you're doing that with over the course of how many different shows
Mhm.
really adds.
Yeah, I kind of have like two thoughts as you were kind of even just describing like printing scripts. Like one is kind of like reframing our reference of what convenience means. Cause
Mhm.
like it is so easy to be like, oh, well, convenience is just like having the script right here. But it's like, but you actually like took all the time to print all of that rather than just like printing what is needed. Like,
Right.
it's like such an easy, or, we have a perception of what convenience is until we actually like really reevaluate it. And then
Yeah.
I was also reminded how when you're talking about a script, because like in my own like personal life, I try and like when I'm trying to think like more sustainably, I try and think of like, well, what are my single use items that I'd use once and then throw away? And I think bringing up a script, I think, is a really interesting thing because in some ways you don't think of it as a single use item, but it kind of is like in a 5 to 6 week kind of time frame because you
Mhm.
pretty much do get rid of it unless like there's a theater that's got a really diligent like library. um but I think it
And
also,
especially in terms of like actor and designer scripts, I feel
yeah,
like, you know, because
yeah.
most theaters do keep like a copy of like the prompt book with the script, like
Hmm.
as an archive, at least for a time.
Hmm.
But all the other copies are like not even when the run is done, as soon as the show is open, like
Hmm. Hmm.
done.
I also think of some of the other items that just as you're going through rehearsal that are kind of like single use items. I mean, tech is always kind of difficult inherently because like things can be changing like so
Yeah.
quickly in tech. Like I think that can be kind of like a difficult thing to kind of find that balance sometimes too. So,
Yeah. One of the things that I implemented really recently, and I can't take credit, I totally stole this from another stage manager, is having a virtual call board as like a Google Drive folder. And so instead of like when there's an update to the calendar or the contact sheet or something, printing everybody a new copy of it, just updating it
hmm.
in there and telling everybody in the daily call, like, hey, this is in the Google Drive. Here's the
Hmm.
link.
Hmm. Do you find that that's something that like you as a stage manager can just kind of like establish for yourself, or do you feel
Mhm.
like sometimes you have to like with different venues like work within different systems to kind of make things paperless? And maybe that's a hard question to ask coming out of a pandemic, particularly, but
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
kind
And also like, I mean, I've worked the vast majority of my career at like the same one venue.
of. Mhm.
But I think it depends on the venue because some definitely do have like, no, we want you to do it this way,
Mhm.
like have their systems. But I think a lot of places, really it is just the stage manager's prerogative to like
Mhm.
set that up
Mhm.
and to do it. And as long as you know, do it well and it's easily accessible for everybody, like I don't think there would be a lot of pushback, especially because for me at least, it always comes with the caveat of like, this is the system I've set up.
Mhm.
If for some reason like you don't have access to that for whatever reason, I'm always happy to like get that information to you in a different way, whether that be like an emailed PDF or printing it out for you or what be it, you know, whatever that might be.
Mhm. Yeah, that kind of flexibility is exactly why I'm like, stage managers are gonna make this happen for the larger theater community. Cause I just think of like um different like productions where like just the way that like stage managers can like so set the tone like in a rehearsal room or something like that. Like being able to just I almost like envision like a rehearsal report like that also has a like uh I don't know, like green choices that were made or green questions that we can ask, that way that
Mhm.
you can kind of like shift the culture or like bring awareness in that way,
Mhm.
is something that uh, I think is very achievable. It's like those little changes that you can make to start to
Yeah.
get, because then I also think of how other people start to think differently. And when it's like, oh, there's already like your green section in the rehearsal report, it's kind of like that daily reminder for other, I mean, I think as a designer, because I am a designer. So,
Right.
but yeah. I'm curious, do you have any productions coming up that you think have a lot of opportunity for like green choices?
Um, I think some of my productions a little farther down the pipe do.
Mhm.
My next production is at the Guthrie, and so honestly, I just have no idea what their system is, but I feel pretty certain that they will have a system.
Mm.
Um, and so I don't know how much flexibility I'll have within that, especially as uh, a new incoming stage manager there, like stage managing there for the first time and not as like a more familiar face. I do think once you've like established yourself with a company, you have a lot more leeway and a lot more voice
Yeah.
to implement things and to say like, hey, maybe we do it this way. Have you ever thought about this?
Yeah.
Uh,
I kind of think of that as a designer sometimes too, that sometimes like when you're like, what, like a little bit as a designer, I think I can like position myself as like a green designer, right?
mhm.
But sometimes there's just some productions where it's like the production and the combination of the fact that you're new doesn't always like give you as much leeway because you have to spend time like learning things. Like you almost
Yeah,
got to kind of like learn just the way things are done to be able to be like, what if we did this? Like,
yeah, yeah. It
kind of.
takes a lot more bandwidth to stage manage the same show at a theater that you've never worked at before versus the exact
Yeah.
same where you've worked there a lot, just
Yeah.
because there's so many other things like figuring out who on staff you're supposed to ask that question to, or how they divvy up this, or what their policies on that are. And so there's just like less mental energy that I can devote to other things.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause sometimes just learning names inherently is its like own task as well. So, which for a stage
learning names,
manager is,
learning where everything is in the building, like
yeah. Yeah. It's a very, very reminded of how much time it takes to get to just know names and things like that. But
yeah.
so,
But I am very hopeful because the things I have coming up in the spring, at least right now, are all with companies that I have worked with previously, and
mhm.
so feel much more hopeful that like those are places where like I kind of know what the status quo is
Yeah.
and can like work from that baseline to like create more sustainable practices.
Yeah. Well, if you're ever like brainstorming something, just and you're just need like someone to like bounce an idea out off of, just like reach out to me if you're like, how does this sound, or something like
Yeah.
that. Because I think sometimes also with like doing green choices, I think more people are interested in it
Mhm.
than what is like actually vocalized, and that's something that I hope the Green Theater Alliance can help kind of make a more common thing or bring up in conversation a little bit more, as I think sometimes we just get so like in the rhythm of things that we don't think to bring it up with some of our regular folks too. So
Yeah.
yeah, so feel free to reach out, because I do know that there's other stage managers that are interested in it. They might not just be here tonight, so I'm hoping that we can like develop some kind of like cohort group so that like we can like bounce ideas around as well. So, but one question that I've been asking in these conversations as well is, if you had a magic wand and could just wave your magic wand to solve any problem, what what would the problem be, and what would that magic wand make for you to solve that problem? I mean,
I mean,
we work with props, right? So it's a
right. It's a prop wand. It's magic.
It's magic. So
It
can
actually, it works all the time.
yes, it has a endless supply of batteries. So
I was just gonna say, what kind of batteries does it take?
rechargeable.
Excellent. I mean, are we talking specifically like in the world of like green theater and sustainability, or?
Yeah,
Okay,
kind of
right.
within theater, if you could kind of wave your wand and solve a problem, what would it be? And if you have a couple ideas, we can go through each of those too.
I mean, I would love to see a better system for reusing things from previous productions, whether that be props or costume pieces or set pieces or just general like set building supplies. And I do think that like we're moving in that direction, some departments more rapidly than others, but like it has always been like so personally disheartening to me, like because I've worked on strike crews for shows and stuff, and like seeing the whole set just get like sledgehammered down and tossed into a dumpster, and like there's a lot, I totally recognize that like there's a whole slew of like reasons for that in terms of the labor and, you know, the storage and the finding anybody who those things would actually be useful for. But like I always just look at that, those sorts of things, and I'm like, man, like that's just so much going to waste that like is
Yeah.
still perfectly usable, you know,
It's
items.
it's kind of like the elephant in the room of like the most obvious, like how can we just keep things out of the dumpster kind of conversation. I don't know if
And,
you've seen
and granted, like some of them are easier than others. Like costumes, it's really easy to like, especially if it's not like a super particular specialized costume, you can at the very least easily drop it off for a donation at Goodwill if you don't want it anymore, and somebody else can wear that t-shirt or those pants or whatever. Or like, you know, I know there's like rental systems in place for items like that and for things like props, but like scenic especially is like, I realize that's a hard one to solve. And I wish we could solve it.
I don't know if you've seen on Facebook, but there's a group of scenic and prop folks. We're getting together and we're starting a company called Next Stage. Haha, the pun. So we're trying to we've got a couple different prongs going on with it. So one is taking material like offcut materials or like previously used materials and upcycling them into like other items. So like one thing that we're doing with it is creating art panels, like just hardboard art panels. Because it's amazing how many like offcuts just get like thrown, like not even like stuff that is made into scenery, but the stuff that is cut off. And like maybe it's a weird like shape, but when you think of it in the context of an art panel, you can get a lot of use out of it yet still. And so there's kind of like that's just like one of the ideas that we have, but we're trying to like come up with some other ideas. So that's one like prong that we're doing. And then we're hoping to have kind of like a rental and reuse aspect of things. Like last weekend, Trevor and I were literally pulling stuff out of a dumpster and we filled up his minivan. So we were like, we were able to save at least like a 4x4x8 space from like going in the trash.
Nice.
So like knowing, I'm hoping that Next Stage can kind of help be that resource to kind of at least minimize the impact of things going in the trash. And we're hoping like maybe long term, and long term, like hopefully sooner rather than later, but to have part of the website for Next Stage be a platform so that there's kind of like a central place that you can like go and look at kind of like a universal inventory of like, oh, I need a circular staircase. Oh, it's actually at this theater. I need a trunk. Oh, it's over at this theater. So that even though it's like a central, what it's almost like an eBay or like an Etsy of like
Yeah.
theatrical prop rental things. Cause I know even for myself, like with some of the props that I've like gathered over the years, I'm like, this is actually like a perfectly good prop. And there's like no reason that like if someone else needs it, like I would gladly give it to them. But like it's hard for me to be like, this is in my closet.
Yeah.
There it is. So oh, that's my dog. So hopefully next stage can help solve some of that. Some of that kind of reducing the impact of like what's going in the trash, but also helping to like kind of like empower designers, I think also to like be like have confidence that they can like start a production meeting by saying like how are we incorporating green elements into this, and a big part of that is knowing where is it going, like what are we doing to the materials that we can either resave them or like where is it going after. I think is a big part of like a culture shift in theater that we're hoping to kind of also inspire. So, but yeah, so hopefully your magic wand is close.
We'll hope. The other magic wand thing that I thought would be like just sustainable office supplies that are actually like comparable to the like non-sustainable versions.
Yeah.
Because like more sustainable options definitely do exist, but they don't necessarily work as well. And especially like with like the rate that I go through them, or like, I don't know, I'm very particular about those things for me.
Yeah.
Like I have one type of notebook that I like for work, and it's like it only exists at Office Max, and it's like, but that's just for whatever reason, that's like what works with my brain for stage managing the best. And so like,
yeah,
I can't switch. And like there's a couple things like that, or things like the off-brand Post-its never stick as good as the name brand, you know?
Yeah.
And so having alternatives that actually were more sustainable and were as good or even better, so you didn't feel like you were like sacrificing quality and usability.
I'm gonna add that to my list of like things to look out for.
Yeah, because like people find those things, I'm totally down. I know one of the things that I found, and it's at Target if anybody wants to get it, is a metal mechanical pencil. Like the mechanical pencil is, it's like stainless steel or some kind of metal as opposed to plastic, which is great because the plastic ones in my experience always inevitably break, and then you have to get a new one. Whereas I've had this same pencil now for a couple years at least, and like you still have to buy like the lead for it, but the pencil itself is like looks brand new.
Yeah, like that's definitely like even compared to like a wood pencil, like a metal mechanical pencil. I appreciate that your dog like walked by in the background, is like my dog is like over here barking because someone's fire alarm is going off. Oh, pups.
Usually
pups
I Zoom sitting on the floor in front of my couch so that she can have her spot, but
yeah.
share today. So
I remember in undergrad in my stage management class, one of the assignments that we had, because it was kind of like make a big list of like what would be in your stage management kit. Because I used to stage manage at one point in my life, but then when I was in human resources, I was like, this is too much of the same thing all the time of like organizing people.
Yep. So dealing with people and their issues. And
yeah. So my stage management kit actually morphed into this is so specific for me, but it became my when I go to weddings and I'm a bridal attendant, it became like my like kit that I would bring to weddings. So like mine
has very similar.
It's a very similar like day of need thing, but now it has a few more. Jeez, my dogs are barking. But but I remember, hold on one second.
Is there like war of the squirrels going on in your yard or what?
I'm gonna throw treats at them to distract them from what's ever in the hallway right now. So hopefully, yes, you, oh my goodness. But what I was saying, so like for my assignment that in college, it was like, make a list that is your like stage management, like when you are gonna go buy your stage management kit, you have it ready. I almost
Yeah.
want to make like the green SM kit available, like so that like
Yes.
around town people like, or maybe it's like just a list of like order this thing, because I think sometimes like when we're talking about like green supplies, like
Mhm.
sometimes they're not, it's kind of that balance of like buy things local, but like are the local things sometimes the most sustainable thing?
Yeah.
I think some of those like newer companies that are making, maybe more sustainable products are only available, through shipment like that. So
Right.
as you like find things like office supplies like that, I'd be definitely interested in kind of developing like that
Yeah.
kind of a like, if you're like refreshing your stage management kit or building a new one, like here's a list of like considerations. I think that that would be really helpful for folks.
One of the
So,
big ones that I have not done because again, I'm like ridiculously particular about my stage management notebook, but I know other people who have successfully switched is the Rocket Book,
mhm.
which is a reusable notebook that you essentially like scan the page or like take a picture with. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but basically it allows you to digitally what you wrote down, and then I think you actually microwave it. Don't quote me on that, but like, and it erases, and then you can just keep reusing the same pages, like the
Really?
physical pages over and over, but it
Mhm.
saves all the information that you wrote on those pages.
Huh.
Yeah.
That would definitely like cut down on paper, but I can see how it's kind of like that idea of like reframing what convenience means to us again,
Yeah.
because like then you have to you have to like take a picture and like clean it, which is like definitely a step.
Yes.
Um,
I believe, and again, like I'm not super familiar because I don't use it, but I believe it also over time is supposed to learn your handwriting and like will like transfer that into a document form, which in theory would then be searchable. So on
oh,
that hand would then potentially be like a huge time saver, because if you're going back and looking like, did I like, what note did I take about that? Or I could have sworn that I like wrote that down,
yeah,
instead of rifling through X number of pages, you can just search for the thing.
yeah. Well,
So
it's
it's definitely intriguing. And I know there are some people who do use that successfully. So
yeah.
good one
It's
for the list.
Yeah, it's kind of like reframing what convenience means, but it's also kind of like one school of thought is also keeping in mind like the triple bottom line, which is maybe like more of an organizational approach, but I can also see it being like transferable to stage management as well. But it's that idea that you're not only like measuring an organization's success in terms of like financial bottom line, but you also think of the environmental and social in terms of like, it's real like we all like have seen like some kind of financial statement that we can be like, this is where we're at financially. But I think when you start to think of like the social and environmental impact of things, like things that might seem like cheap or easy may not actually have a like socially or environmental cheap and easy impact the way that they do financially. And I think we're all just like so ingrained that we think of things like in a financial and like kind of like a time sense, I think as well, that we
Mhm.
don't always think of like the social and the environmental impact on an equal level with those things too. So,
Yeah.
well, those are some great wish list items. So hopefully we'll be able to over the next year or so be able to make some of those things a reality for you as well. So, but um is there anything else in kind of like a green theater sense that's kind of like on your mind or you have a question about or anything like that?
Um, I don't know. I mean, I'd be very curious, in future meetings or if other people respond with ideas to know like what other people's thoughts are. Because I'm just coming at it from like my perspective and my experience. And I'm sure I'm missing things.
Mhm.
Uh, sorry, my dog is now decided this is playtime.
Oh, well, I mean, that seems to be the theme tonight for both of
Yeah.
us with our hounds here. So, but
At least
well,
it's not the squeaky toy. We're fine.
yeah, that would always, comes up well on Zoom. So,
Yeah. Okay.
I think I'll go ahead and I'll stop the recording at this point.